2020, it's a year we'll never forget, filled with high highs and low lows. In this Year in Review special, we'll look back at everything from protests and parades to violence and victories. Tonight, we start with the biggest story of 2020, the coronavirus pandemic.
COVID-19 case numbers continue to rise on both sides of the state line.
At the time of this taping, Kansas was inching toward 200,000 cases with more than 2,200 deaths. Missouri, 382,000 cases with more than 5,200 deaths. But there is hope in sight. Coronavirus vaccines are being rolled out nationwide, including right here in Kansas City. Frontline workers and nursing home residents are the first to get vaccinated, with a CDC panel recommending essential workers and people over the age of 75 up next. The hope is for the general public to be vaccinated by mid-2021. But let's go back to March of 2020, when both Missouri and Kansas reported their first cases of coronavirus. Soon after that, both states, unfortunately, saw their first deaths. One of the first losses in our area was Dennis Wilson, a long-term educator. The father of 3 and grandfather of 6 moved with his wife Joanna to Lenexa to be closer to their family. Joanna said as soon as schools closed because of the virus, Dennis's first thought was to try and help.
Before he got sick, we talked about, hey, we could have some kids for daycare in here because, you know, people that had to go to work and their kids were in school no longer had a school for them to go to. And daycare would be short, short supply for those kids. And we thought, wouldn't there be neat if we took some kids in here and we helped them with their schoolwork? And that would be a way in which to help out some families.
Sadly, Dennis got sick before he could help. He went to 2 urgent care centers after experiencing flu-like symptoms. He was not tested for COVID because he didn't have a fever. When his condition got worse, he was hospitalized and finally tested positive for COVID-19, but he died shortly thereafter.
As cases and deaths continued to rise, cities and counties across the metro started enforcing stay-at-home orders. Exceptions to staying at home included things like going to the pharmacy, getting groceries, getting gas. Kansas City Mayor Quintin put a stay-at-home order in place at the end of March to stop the spread of the virus, but did not want the public to panic.
There is no reason to go out and run on all the grocery stores, to hoard toilet paper, to do any of that type of activity. Our supply chains are good in this country. Our supply chains continue to be good. You can continue to go to the grocery store. You can continue to take care of necessities, take care of your family, take care of close personal acquaintances if you're the one who checks on the nice lady next door, right? These are the sorts of things that we still allow you to do.
Essential businesses stayed open during stay-at-home orders, and masks became a part of our everyday lives. While Kansas has a statewide mask mandate, Missouri is one of 12 states that does not. Kansas City and many of the surrounding counties do have one, however. The CDC used Kansas to highlight the public health benefits of wearing a mask. Researchers found infection rates dropped by 6% in counties who imposed Governor Laura Kelly's July 3rd mask mandate. In counties that opted out, rates increased by 100%.
Given the risk, nursing homes started implementing even stricter rules. Many nursing homes started by asking volunteers to stay home and limiting access points to one, the main entrance. As the situation rapidly evolved this year, nursing homes closed their doors to visitors altogether and emphasized hygiene for workers.
It's going back to the basics of ensuring that everyone is hand washing, that we have hand sanitizer, available for everyone, and encouraging, associates to stay home if they're ill.
Over the course of the pandemic, many nursing homes have become hotbeds for the virus.
So this spring, schools closed to keep students and staff safe, and teachers started teaching virtually. Classes moving online allowed seniors to graduate on time. Those graduation ceremonies were either socially distanced and masked or virtual. A lot of things changed, and while many schools physically reopened in the fall, most have returned to virtual learning since then. And while many school-aged athletics were canceled altogether, the Kansas High School Athletic Association will let parents in schools for winter sports this season. That decision followed 2 hours of discussion. It's a reversal from the board's previous ruling, which banned all spectators. Individual school leaders in Kansas will still get to decide if parents will be allowed inside schools, and not everybody is on board.
if we are doing anything that contributes to the uncontrolled spread, and we continue to do that, the travesty is that in many places our students are not in school and we're in remote, and that's not good for anybody, but it's certainly not good for students who are at risk already.
Kansas High School Athletic Association members say they feel confident each school will make the right decision based on COVID-19 numbers in their district.
Even though people didn't get their tax return checks as early as usual in 2020, in April, Americans did start getting stimulus checks. Individuals making less than $75,000 a year got $1,200. Couples earning less than $150,000 a year got $2,400. While those stimulus checks helped a lot of people pay rent, for thousands, the federal rent moratorium ends this year. The measure was supposed to protect tenants during the pandemic, but it didn't stop some from losing their homes. Andrea Messina was evicted in October. She's now struggling to find a new place to live. She says 2 landlords have turned her down because she was evicted.
I'm terrified that I'm going to end up on the streets.
That must be really hard to deal with.
It's scary. It's very scary.
KC Mayor Quintin is pushing for that moratorium to be extended until June in Kansas City.
And to see the depth of the financial hit because of the pandemic, look no further than our restaurant industry. Since the pandemic began across Kansas City, we've seen several restaurants cut staff, even close their doors permanently. But many local restaurants have adapted to stay open. They did what they had to do to close all their indoor dining, and they did it again under new occupancy limits. Ordering takeout, still a great way to help. How and what you order will make a difference. First, order directly from the restaurant when you can. Try to avoid using a third-party delivery service. Some of them charge restaurants a fee to provide that service. Ordering from the restaurant also guarantees that you'll have an up-to-date menu. Also, don't forget about the possibility of ordering cocktails to go. Those typically have a higher profit margin and can make up for the customers who can't sit at the bar right now.
A guy the other night come in, had 8 martinis to go, or they buy bottles of wine to go. So every little bit helps.
Every little bit. You might also consider buying a gift card. That gives the business immediate revenue, especially.
Restaurants that have stayed open have often served meals to frontline workers. Those professional routines have drastically changed. Even the way they show empathy looks different. Our Kevin Mahomes spoke with several frontline workers pushing through the challenges while providing others comfort. He now introduces us to Kathy Riegel, a chaplain at the University of Kansas Hospital.
True love knows no limit.
It doesn't feel good to have to limit love.
Unless it's at a hospital during COVID-19.
My heart says, compassion rules, and we want to have as many people that love a patient around them at the time of their death, and we're not able to do that now.
In this pandemic, it's 1 visitor per patient per day, even those in their final days. Kathy Riegelman is the chaplain for the University of Kansas Health System.
As a chaplain, if you had to use a scripture to describe these times, what would that be?
Psalm 27, the Lord is my light and my salvation. And so that's what I want to keep shining through, that this isn't a time where one's faith just drops away, but where that stays intact. But there's another one, that Psalm 69, that says the waters are up to my neck. And there are times when it feels like, we're in this pretty deep.
If the depth of the waters are up to her neck, for Chaplain Riegelman, everything above the neck is covered in PPE, making her job even more difficult.
It's challenging me to find ways to be more expressive with my face when they can only see about a third of it, and to remember to speak up because not everyone can hear my muffled voice through the mask. It wouldn't be unusual for me, if it's appropriate, to reach out and touch someone on the shoulder or to take their hand when we're praying together. And that kind of physical contact, which is something that can be very important, and another way of expressing empathy, has been limited.
And so Riegelman has had to find new ways to show she's engaged, exaggerating facial expressions, for example, and saying and ah more often.
Because they can't really see it on my face as easily.
The chaplain, who's normally bedside, now provides comfort via conference call.
How much more difficult is that to have your final moments with someone via phone or some sort of video conferencing or something where I can't reach out to you?
It doesn't feel like the most natural or compassionate way to offer care, that's for sure. I've been with several families of COVID patients, and it just seems like it's becoming more and more real how devastating this virus is.
And so the chaplain leans on Faith and her husband for comfort.
I know I got home one day after a really hard day, and I didn't say hardly anything, and my husband looked at me and said, "I think you need to take a walk." It seems clear that this is turning into a marathon and that it's not a sprint. When it started, I think there was an idea that we were going to get through this probably in months' time, and it's the length of it and kind of the adapting that this is our normal right now, that I know for myself, I'm getting a little bit weary of all of it.
And she's not alone, right? All weary souls need comforting, even if they're tasked with providing comfort to others.
Just hope I can keep doing it and keep going.
Some tasked with saving others lost their lives in the line of duty. EMT Billy Birmingham died because of the coronavirus. Captain Bobby Rocha lost his fight against the virus later on. The following day, communications specialist Scott Davidson died after contracting the virus.
But we hope there is light at the end of the tunnel. This nurse at Truman Medical Center in Kansas City made history as the first person in the metro to get vaccinated for COVID-19. She told us getting that shot, absolutely worth it.
If we can take this one step closer to beating this virus, I think it's absolutely worth it. We have a long road ahead of us. Even if this is the ticket, we have a very long road ahead of us. But I think this leap of faith is how we're going to get through.
Coming up, first a pandemic, then an epidemic, the issue wreaking havoc in our community.
And on that, many say enough is enough. What some are doing to affect positive change.
A crisis in Kansas City. Crime tape and police lights became the backdrop of the metro this year as it battled a record homicide rate. In 2020 alone, the city experienced hundreds of shootings, forcing police officers to work at an impossible pace. At the time of this taping, Kansas City sits at 174 homicide. That's the highest number ever recorded in a single year.
KCPD Chief Rick Smith offered a theory for the spike in violence we saw this year. He suggested that protests could have played a role.
I think we kind of created the perfect storm when we had everyone isolated, and then we had a very major event happen, and all of a sudden, crime spiked across the country very quickly.
When asked about the record-breaking violence, Mayor Quintin recently talked about Kansas City's effort to try and slow it down.
One of the most disappointing parts about this year was that a lot of great programs we had, Teens in Transition, for example, and others, we weren't able to do for a number of months. And all of those activities have still been modified. While that might be an explanation, it's not an excuse. We need to make sure that we're doing more, and I hope that next year we see this number lower.
Kansas City has a violent past, though never at this rate. Back in 1993, we saw 153 homicides, and that was when gangs were at war and a drug epidemic was taking over the city, politicians at the time said.
This ought to be as much concern to the folks in Johnson County as it is in Jackson County, or Clay County as it is in Jackson County.
I want to highlight just a few of the lives cut short this year to put faces to these numbers. A gunman shot 19-year-old Daisy Martinez in the street as she was celebrating her heritage on Mexican Independence Day.
1-year-old Tyron Patton shot and killed while sitting in the car with his parents this year. KCPD still trying to find the person who did that. And 16-year-old Anthony Strassel was killed when he was getting food with his father, and he got shot. These victims, just a few of the dozens upon dozens this year, each with their own tragic stories.
We recently asked Kansas City police how they felt about the crisis of violence in our community. One officer told us he was just as shocked by the numbers as members of the general public.
171 it's an absurd number. It's way more than we've ever even considered.
And Rosalind Temple from KC Mothers in Charge tells us it's time for the community to take a stand against the ongoing violence.
It's no way Kansas City should be at 171 homicides. This is outrageous. The whole community should be outrageous. Every time it's a homicide, everyone must come out their houses and these neighborhoods and make a stand, and so people can see that we have enough.
This year, Mayor Lucas announced a four-pronged plan to curb violence in the city. One of the prongs is prevention, which means investing in troubled neighborhoods. He kicked off a series of town hall meetings with neighborhood tours. The mayor says based on what he's seen and heard from people living in the community, he's committed to making long-term change.
And so what we can't do is say, God help us, if in 2021 there are still a lot of shootings, there are still a lot of homicides, we can't just say, well, let's just abandon it all immediately. What we need to do is say, all right, no, what are the good tools that we're following and using?
Another prong of the mayor's anti-violence plan is enforcement and community. People say the police department needs to work to build trust. We talked to leaders with Ad Hoc and the Urban League of Greater Kansas City. They say conversations without action really don't do anything.
It starts with some measurable substantive changes relative to reform with the police department so that we can come to the table in a spirit of trust, in a spirit of accountability, in a spirit of transparency and authenticity.
Activists say when they see change in leadership and policy, that could build trust between community members and the police department.
Young people are stepping up to the plate, hoping to make a difference in this. A nonprofit called Youth Ambassadors KC hosted a virtual peace summit through a new violence prevention program. The goal was to talk about ways to make Kansas City a safer place.
We have to make a change because we can't keep fearing for our life when we want to ride home from the bus or walk home or even just take a foot to just step outside and just feel the fresh air. You don't even know if you're going to make it back in the front door.
The group that organized the summit gives teens jobs and teaches them skills like how to use their voices to affect change.
Coming up, one man's death ignites a rallying cry, what people in our community are still fighting for.
And while some march in the streets, others paint them. The message volunteers hope to send through art.
In 2020, one man's death reignited the Black Lives Matter movement. George Floyd died in Minneapolis in May when an officer knelt on his neck while taking him into custody during an arrest. The incident was caught on camera and went viral on social media, leading to protests against police brutality all around the country and all around the world, really. We saw those demonstrations right here in Kansas City as well. Here's a look back at some of our coverage from those days.
Someone threw a water bottle and it hit me in the back of the head. I'm just fine though right now, but things are very tense and they got very tense, so we kind of booked it out from that area from where we are right now. The smoke is heavy. You can smell it. I can smell it even with this mask on right now. About 30 seconds ago, there were several flashbangs and bombs that the officers threw in the direction of the protesters to try and get them to disperse, and as a result, it is kind of strong right now.
I talked to a woman, her name is Missy, and she was one of the people who first came and sat a little bit closer to the officers as this demonstration kind of kicked off and started to spread out. Here's a little bit of what she had to say.
I'm not watching any more black life being shed in the streets by people that I pay my taxes to. So we pay our taxes for their salaries. We go to work. We cooperate in this community. So if we want to disrupt it to get change, that's what we will do. We will do it today. We will do it tomorrow. We have done it in the past, and we will continue to do it forevermore until there is change. I want my son to go out of this world surrounded by his family of old age. That's what I want. I don't want my son to have to fear driving or jogging or walking or getting Skittles or playing in the park or doing anything, sleeping in his house. I want him to be able to live the same lives and rights that white people live in this country. There's a very good possibility that he might not, and that's why I'm out here. I promise my son won't be a hashtag, and I'm tired of people's sons and fathers and uncles and aunts and grandmothers, and I'm tired of people being hashtags. I'm tired of my people being just a hashtag. I'm tired of them showing our lynchings on social media, on the news. I'm tired of it.
As protests against police brutality continued, Latino, Native American, and Asian demonstrators said it's all about change and sticking together. That's why they supported the Black Lives Matter movement in Kansas City. Minority groups across Kansas City had conversations about how they can be better allies with the black community.
As like an Asian American person, I understand the privilege that I have as a race that has historically been allowed to be white adjacent. and also like suffers from racial strife, but not to the point because we're allowed to pass. And so I need to use my privilege in order to like speak up for those who have been marginalized historically.
We're going to be loud, and we're going to let our Black relatives know that we are not letting your hands go. We walk with you, we stand with you, we're going to continue to fight with you.
The group Votes KC organized a rally to show solidarity with the community, the Black community. Participants walked from Jarboe Park on the west side to City Hall to meet up with the Black Lives Matter protest. In the midst of these protests, a local reverend called for Kansas City Police Chief Rick Smith to resign during a Board of Police Commissioners meeting. Chief Smith then left the meeting. For months, many have called for his resignation, claiming he protects officers accused of excessive force. Dia Wall sat down with Chief Smith and got his thoughts on the protest, budget cuts, and heard his message to people calling for him to step down.
I've served this community for over 33 years. I think I still have more to do, and I have no plans to resign.
Chief, I have to ask you about the video from 35th and Prospect. I don't want to get into too many of the details as far as what the department's response is going to be, but what was your feeling watching it?
Well, I think everyone feels it's unfortunate that a lady who is pregnant 9 months is involved in one of our arrests, right? We didn't ask her to get involved. She chose to insert herself in our arrest. At that point, our officer made the decision that he wanted to effect the arrest for her for getting involved in that arrest. And, you know, that's what he did. And I think from everything that we've seen that he acted reasonably to effect that arrest.
If you could appeal to the community, obviously there is a lot of frustration about that video. Other videos that have come out, just different instances across the city. I recognize that police have a tough job to do. I think most of the community does, but I definitely get a lot of feedback, we do, that some people don't necessarily feel that kinship or closeness to the police department.
I understand. I certainly, I'm not taking anything away from anybody to feel that. I mean, I would hope that everyone in America saw the video and feel somewhat sorry for the lady who has to get arrested. Again, I wish she would have chose different actions.
The headline of your blog says proposed budget cuts would mean loss of 400 police personnel, and you also note the remainder would have 2-week furloughs. Can you talk to me about how you get to, I mean, roughly 30% of your officers having to be let go?
When we look at the police department budget, 90% of it's salary and benefits, and much of the other 10% is already committed year to year. So the only way to achieve numbers in the millions is usually through personnel.
Up north, people have very fond things to say about the police department, but when you go to some of these neighborhoods in the inner city, they do not feel that they get the protect and serve. They feel like they get the enforcement piece. How do we bridge that gap?
I would say not all of that is entirely accurate. There's some people that will always going to have some distrust with the police, and we want to build those bridges. But I will also say, for the 33 years I've been on this job, we've done nothing but build bridges with our communities. This divide that people create, that they say the police don't want this, or on the opposite side, I would say we are the ones that most want this healing, and we are the ones most that want our community to come together.
Dia Wall, 41 Action News.
And one of the more controversial cases was the death of Cameron Lamb, who an officer shot last December. 6 months later, a grand jury indictment brought involuntary manslaughter and armed criminal action charges against a KC police detective. The grand jury indictment included more than 80 pieces of evidence, more than 80 interviews, but it was missing a probable cause statement from KCPD. Jackson County's prosecutor, Jean Peters Baker, says that's because the police did not believe that a crime occurred. She says she appreciates the role of a grand jury, but expressed frustration at the timeline of the Lamb case.
Trust me when I tell you that I wanted to stand at a podium in February. But I couldn't do that because police simply refused to give me a probable cause statement in this case.
The Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund helped to pay the legal fees of the detective charged in Cameron Lamb's death.
This fall, activists spent 3 weeks camped out on the lawn of Casey Mo's City Hall. After 3 weeks, organizers posted the following on social media. After a historic 21-day occupation at Casey City Hall, the People's City is declaring a ceasefire as talks have begun with public officials regarding reimagination of public safety and divesting funds from law enforcement. The protests started after video of a KCPD officer arresting a pregnant woman went viral. In the video, the officer appeared to put a knee on her back. However, Kansas City police maintain she resisted arrest and that after the woman was handcuffed, she was immediately moved to a seated position. You heard Chief Smith talk about this with Dia just a minute ago. Still, protesters pledged to stay in front of City Hall until several demands were met. Protest organizers posted this victory list on Twitter. It says they are developing long-term housing and mental health resources for the homeless. They add they have forced KCPD to create a use of force policy for pregnant people.
In the midst of all this, artists and volunteers worked together to try and inspire unity in Kansas City. 6 Black Lives Matter murals took over streets throughout town, each with a different design. Paid for through donations, hundreds of people helped to paint these murals, hoping to send a message.
The message that I hope it brings is to end racism, plain and simple. Just end racism, love everyone for who they are.
Those involved in the Black Lives Matter movement in Kansas City hope to create lasting change, they say, and this is just one effort toward that.
Coming up, the elections dominated the headlines. Hear from winners what their next steps will be.
And voting during a pandemic, the changes made this year to try and keep people safer.
Voting changed the year due to the pandemic. For the first time, more people could vote by mail without having to give a reason. In Kansas City, more than 19,000 people voted by mail. In Jackson County, over 30,000. Clay County saw 17,000 mail-in voters. Platte County received more than 8,000 votes by mail.
Having that flexibility to be able to get your ballot by mail or go vote in person absentee on the day that works best for you, I think certainly worked to voters' advantage this year.
Missouri Secretary of State said there weren't any major problems during the election.
In the race for Missouri governor, Governor Mike Parson won re-election over Nicole Galloway this year. Galloway will continue in her role as state auditor.
Listening to your stories, your hopes, your dreams motivated me to get into this race. It was a privilege meeting so many families over the course of this campaign. Contrary to what people may see in our politics right now, campaigns are about hope and optimism, not fear.
Now, this was the first time that Governor Mike Parson was elected to the office. He took over 2 years ago when former Governor Eric Greitens resigned. Now he promises to build up the economy while fighting COVID-19. He also stressed enforcing law and order all throughout the campaign.
This election, and I've said it on the trail a lot, this election was about preserving freedom, capitalism, and the rule of law is what this election was all about. And however, there is more work to be done.
Voters in Missouri also approved one of the most controversial ballot issues in the state. Amendment 3 passed 51 to 49%, and it gets rid of the Clean Missouri Act, which voters just approved 2 years ago. State Auditor Nicole Galloway will no longer choose a demographer to draw new district lines subject to approval from state committees. Instead, that responsibility is now in the hands of Governor Mike Parson. He'll appoint a bipartisan panel to draw new district boundaries.
In the Kansas Senate race, Roger Marshall beat Barbara Boyer. Marshall credited his victory to his team's ground game. He promised to keep up that same work ethic in the Senate, where he pledged to fight for Kansas values.
We knew from day one that we were going to be outspent 3-1, 4-1. We didn't know what it would be, so we had to win the grassroots war. And our Kansas GOP Republican chair people just did an incredible job.
In her concession speech, Boyer said she hopes her campaign helped break down the divisiveness of politics.
Kansas has been working its way back from the partisan fringes for several years, and it has been a team effort. Our progress has not always been linear, but I hope my candidacy in 2020 made a meaningful contribution to the journey.
Roger Marshall said he will make it his mission to end partisanship in Washington, D.C. He pledged to represent the entire state, Democrats, Republicans, and anyone else. He said everyone is a Kansan first.
With the control of the U.S. Senate in play, all eyes are on Georgia for the January 5th election runoff there. Georgia has 2 U.S. Senate runoff races. If the Democrat candidates win both, they would flip control of the Senate from the Republican Party.
Coming up, a win 50 years in the making, how Kansas City celebrated its hometown heroes.
And 2020 marks a 100th anniversary, the legacy the Negro Leagues leave behind.
As we look back on 2020, this was also the year to look back on another important chapter of our history. 100 years ago, the Negro Leagues were founded in Kansas City.
February 13th was a time to celebrate. Prominent people in the community and baseball all paused to recognize why this milestone means so much.
Welcome to the future Buck O'Neill Education and Research Center, the former Purcell YMCA.
Also the birthplace of the Negro Leagues back in 1920 in historic 18th and Vine.
A testimony to the spirit of the community here in Kansas City.
This is where I joined the Y. I can't even tell how many basketball games I played in here.
A century later, the history made here has a home just down the street.
The story told on the walls of that museum is incredible. This place reinforces to us how important it is for all of us to elevate the lesson the Negro Leagues so powerfully taught us.
It commemorates baseball history, but it's more than that.
This will be a time of celebration, but also a time of reflection. A time to acknowledge the courage of those who helped change America's national pastime, and America too.
If they were alive, they would be overwhelmed because they never expected this kind of appreciation.
That recognition 100 years later, not only seen, but felt.
It's cold outside, but the spirit of the Negro Leagues is very warm.
You couldn't keep them down. They loved the game of baseball, and nothing was going to stop them from playing. When I say great men, they were great men.
Major League Baseball and its Players Association pledged $1 million for the museum as part of that effort.
And Representative Emanuel Cleaver asked the U.S. Treasury to mint a coin to celebrate the Negro Leagues' 100th anniversary. The president made it official by signing the Negro Leagues Baseball Centennial Commemorative Coin Act into law. The coin comes at no cost to taxpayers. The U.S. Treasury will be reimbursed for the costs of issuing them. Funds will eventually go to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum here in Kansas City. To end 2020, a big announcement from MLB also. It's elevating the Negro Leagues to Major League status. That announcement means the statistics and records of approximately 3,400 players in the Negro Leagues from 1920 to 1948, like Willie Mays, Satchel Paige, and Jackie Robinson, will become part of Major League Baseball's official history.
The beautiful thing about our sport is that it is just that, a beautiful game of comparisons and statistics. And what was always missing were the statistical data as it related to the Negro Leagues because it had been lost to time. And so it brings a greater light to that.
MLB and the Elias Sports Bureau are working together to determine the full ramifications this announcement will have on those official Major League records and statistics.
Long overdue this year. Coming up, the pandemic shakes up the world of sports big time. The shutdown that no one saw coming.
But before that shutdown, there was a Super Bowl. Remember that? We look back at some of our coverage of the Chiefs' road to victory. Welcome back. Okay, let's talk about one of the highlights of 2020, the Kansas City Chiefs winning the Super Bowl. Yes, that was this year. Let's take a look back at some of the moments of celebrating our champions.
The game is over. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl for the first time in 50 years. This is it.
I've been a Chiefs fan all my life. I'm so happy right now.
47 years
wasted. Years. Chiefs, go Chiefs.
Exactly, best day ever. From what I can remember in my lifetime, I mean, this is awesome.
I've watched the last 3 games with you, McShaver. Yeah. And they were down 24-0 against Houston. We looked at each other. We were concerned. Yeah. We were very concerned. Yeah. They were down 10-0 against Tennessee. We were very concerned. Mahomes threw that second pick, and we were concerned. They were down 10. You might as well call the Chiefs the cardiac kids. None of that matters because that never die, that never give up attitude. Yeah. It's resulted in
Oh, some confetti. I got to pick up some.
Yeah.
Right there.
Well, the thing about this team was that it had that never say die attitude, and that's definitely spread to the people in the audience. They have been dancing this entire time all night. If we can show the stage, this guy with the flag has been here pepping up the crowd the entire time as he's got the big flag and he's dancing the whole night. It spreads to the crowd. Look at this crowd right now. Look at this crowd.
Well, it's a good thing practically every school district in the Metro canceled classes for this. This is going to be a memory that they will never forget.
Yeah, Travis? All right, Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes.
Patrick Mahomes.
Knocking back a CL smoothie.
Travis
and we've got the WWE World Championship belt.
Here we go.
This season, the adversity we deal with the injuries. I mean, my knee was in the side of my leg, but we still went back and we won the Super Bowl. We the champs, baby.
My knee was in the side of my leg. By the way, not long after that, Mr. Mahomes inked a 10-year deal worth close to $500 million. Worth every penny, right? The largest contract in North American sports history, reportedly worth upwards of $500 million, and will keep Patrick Mahomes in the city of Fountains through 2032. Players just don't sign contracts like that in the NFL. Even better, Mahomes' agent says he left money on the table when he signed that contract.
It's just nice to remember all that, isn't it? March Madness turned into March Sadness, though. This year's Big 12 tournament and the 2020 NCAA tournament canceled due to the pandemic. Despite a 28-win regular season and being named the #1 overall seed for the Big Dance, Bill Self's Kansas Jayhawks left March empty-handed.
Well, Mr. Reliable exits stage left for the Kansas City Royals in 2020. Also, Alex Gordon retired after 14 years with the squad. How about some hardware for Gordo on the way out, too? His 8th Golden Glove in 2020. 4 years in a row for him. He received a second Platinum Glove as well. Gordon, of course, part of that magical World Series championship team in 2015.
Oh, yeah.
Called KC his home away from home. He will be missed.
Very cool to see how much the guys appreciated him. Okay, after the break, 41 Action News gives back. We show you what we and you are doing to spread cheer this holiday season.
To close out our year in review, we want to share one last We See You story.
Yeah, our We See You KSHB initiative aims to highlight the good happening in our community.
Yeah, some of the 41 Action News team spent a few hours volunteering just recently. Nearly 24 of us went to Harvesters, packing snacks for students in need, boxing up food for adults unable to afford groceries. There's Charlie Keegan, just one of the efforts we make each year to give back to our community. Yes, Lindsay Shively, I did actually get my hands dirty a little bit. Climbed into some of those bins to get some of the food, but always a lot of fun being able to help out and do that with my coworkers. We missed you. We knew you couldn't come that day. We missed you there that day.
And you know, we're just at Harvesters recently talking about the absolute incredible need they are seeing right now. So if you're thinking about volunteering or donating, they would welcome your support.
Thank you so much for joining us for this end of the year review. We appreciate you being with us all year long.
From all of us here at 41 Action News, we wish you a safe, healthy, and happy 2021.